Today is December 28th, 2021. My name is John Baldessari. I'm coming to you from Yellow Springs, Ohio. And I want to talk to you about the topics of addiction, mental illness, and post traumatic stress disorder. I consider these brain afflictions that are quite prevalent in our culture these days, and something that I think we all need to understand a little better. My background is 40 years of professional experience working in treatment settings for all three of these brain afflictions, and working with thousands of people over the years who I have observed moving into long-term recovery and experiencing life in its fullest, most joyous, healthy way. And I want to share with you some of what I learned along the way. Over that 40-some year career, I have to admit I didn't know much of anything. When I started off in this thing, I came from a family that was so afflicted. There were addictions of all type. There were various mental illnesses around the family, actually everywhere I looked, I suppose. And there was a lot of trauma, a lot of violence in the household, that sort of thing. So I saw this up close, and what I learned about it, I learned from the adults, of course, and they were very vocal in their judgment of the person who was undergoing some sort of crisis related to addiction, mental illness, or PTSD. And the response oftentimes was quite harsh in nature, punitive, a lot of anger, sadness, blaming, a lot of emotional upset, finger pointing, all of that sort of thing. You could do better if you really tried, if you wanted to. You don't have to drink that much. What the hell are you doing to me, to us? All of that sort of thing. High drama, high emotion. And so I went to college. I got a bachelor's degree in sociology. I started working in a mental institution, a state-operated 2,000 people housed there. It seemed to be like a warehouse for humans. There wasn't a lot of good care being provided, and I was fairly appalled. And I lasted about 6 months doing that. Then I went to work in a detox center. Found myself feeling really comfortable in that setting. I enjoyed that work immensely. A group of us got together and developed a longer-term program for people who came through detox. We set up the first residential treatment center in Dayton, Ohio, and started seeing what could work for these folks to help them to achieve long-term recovery. Yeah, that was always the goal. These were some great, really wonderful people that I met out there who were dropped off by the cops at our detox center, oftentimes scraped up off the street. We were an alternative to the drunk tank, where a lot of people had died and suffered and spent way too much time. So we were providing some medical care and some deep understanding and acceptance of these folks, and we embraced them. We really loved the work we were doing with these folks. And so that all started around 1973. I found myself working in management positions, supervising counseling staff, directing programs. programs, mostly residential treatment, which was really my first love. I loved doing group therapy. I loved giving presentations. I love the whole engagement part. So anyway, I started learning and changing, unlearning stuff, especially in regards to what I grew up with, what I experienced, what I observed as a child, kind of warped my perspective on this stuff. So I had to unlearn and relearn, and what I ended up with was these folks who were coming to us were truly ill in every kind of way. They were experiencing something that was beyond their control and beyond their intentions. And so I started learning about this different look of this whole thing, moving away from the willpower and the character weakness stuff and all of the emotionally charged stuff, and tried to look at things objectively and really come to understand what was going on with these folks. One of the things we did when we set up this program is we brought people in recovery, long-term recovery, into our treatment center. Usually we plucked them out of AA. We asked somebody who had a couple of years sobriety, or maybe 5 or 10 years or more. We'd ask them to come in and talk to our patients and give them a little hope and tell them what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And so they'd come and talk to our folks, and I'd sit in on these sessions. I was learning too. And what I came away with, I kept hearing the same thing over and over again, so the repetition stuck with me. And what I kept hearing from these folks in long-term recovery is something like, I found out that I was a sick person who needed to get well, not a bad person who needed to get good. I found out I had a disease. This illness has been around for eons. There are people who, if they drink alcohol, for example, they can't escape the ravages of addiction to alcohol. It's just something that is a part of who they are. It might be in their genetic makeup, their DNA. Somehow they are more highly susceptible to the harmful toxic consequences of using that particular drug. Or maybe there's somebody who just drank or drugged a lot for a long time and found themselves addicted. Or someone with a trauma history is going to be a more highly susceptible person around this illness. So anyway, when I kept hearing these people say, a sick person needs to get well, not a bad person needs to get good, I have an illness, it all of a sudden started making sense to me. This attribution, this understanding of what's going on here in this messed up life I have, is that I have an illness. And if I have an illness, there just might be treatment and healing and overcoming of this illness. And so it occurred to me that attribution, that understanding, is the jumping off point for recovery. So when a person finally comes to that realization, my God, I've got a brain illness. There's something up here in there that's different. And when I put alcohol or some other drug that I'm harmfully involved with in my body, stuff goes wrong. I drink or drug more than I wanted to, or I get in some kind of trouble, or I wake up feeling like I'm some sort of a horrible person, or not even a person, not worthy of the opportunity to walk around and live my life. It's a devastating illness that's taken way too many lives. Addiction kills hundreds of thousands of people in this country every year. It often also involves some sort of mental illness or trauma history, and there's a lot of suffering involved. Suffering, of course, for the individual who's so afflicted, and for those affected, their family members or friends, their community. It's something that we need to understand better. My purpose in putting out a video is to just try to get more people on board with the idea that this condition, this addictions thing, this mental illness thing, this PTSD thing can be easily understood by coming to know 5 things. There's 5 things you need to know to come to a good understanding of what we're dealing with here. The very first thing to know is that the person is indeed sick. If I understand it in that way, coming from, my head and my heart in that way, then I can be helpful to that person. If on the other hand, I'm pointing my finger and I'm judging and I'm, saying that this is a bad person, or that this is somebody who is doing this stuff intentionally and, they're really messed up. If I'm judging, I'm not helping. If I accept that this person is really sick, they have a true illness, it happens to be based in the brain. If this person had heart disease or stomach disorder or liver disease or kidney disease or some other organ malfunction, we would show compassion and understand. We'd see that they got the best care and best follow-up care. And everybody's supportive and all of that. In our culture, when we see a person with the disease of this organ, the brain, we oftentimes come from a judgment place in order to try to understand or wrap our head around this thing. And if we step back and we take a look at this person as someone who, for whatever reason, could be genetic in part, it could be environmental in part, it could have to do with a trauma experience they had. Somehow, they have this different brain, this addicted brain, that's causing all these problems in their life. And they need to understand what it is to have that disease and learn all they can about it, and come to know what they're dealing with. That's the very first, most important thing to know about addiction, mental illness, or PTSD. This person is sick. And again, if we want to be helpful, we start from that place. The second thing to know, and that's very important to know, there's 5 things altogether. The second thing that's important to know is this person is very lonely. Over the process of getting sick and through all of what goes along with that, this person has found themselves more and more separate and isolated from other individuals, from former close bonds with family members or best friends or acquaintances in the neighborhood or whatever, a distance has occurred around the person simply being in denial around their disease, and people are seeing certain behaviors and certain presentation, a certain kind of presentation from this person, and they're standing back a little bit, and maybe they're shunning them a little bit. At the same time, the person who has the affliction is saying, I don't want to get too close to this person. I don't want them to see who I really am or what I'm really about. I'm going to keep my distance, and there's more and more separation. There's more and more fear of other people, paranoia, that kind of thing can go on. There's a lot of judgment going in both ways, and again, more and more distance. So as this illness progresses, the person becomes more and more lonely. They could be in a crowd of people and feel terribly alone, and they don't make the connection anymore. Maybe they never did. Some people are never safe. They never feel safe because of abuse in the household and that sort of thing. And so they never even initially make a safe connection with anybody. There's always some kind of distance, and it gets worse over time as this illness progresses. So, very important. This person is sick and they are lonely. They believe nobody understands them. They see themselves as different. There's a lot of misinterpretation of cues and all of that sort of thing. A lot of confusion going on, and again, inability to make a connection. Okay, the third of the 5 really important things to know about this illness is that this person who is sick and lonely is also unable to fix this situation. That on their own, under their own power, exerting all the will that they have, going to every length and coming up with every possible solution, they repeatedly fail at fixing what's wrong and what's going on as their life becomes more chaotic and out of control. It's a really frustrating, tough place to be. It's like nothing I do seems to work out. I, switched from hard liquor to beer, and I should be better off, and I still didn't show up for my kids' play. Or I really intended to not drive my car drunk, and I got a DUI. So I've got this stuff coming down where more and more it shows I'm unable to correct what's going wrong. It continues to come up, it continues to go wrong, and I'm pretty well stuck here. So the person is sick, the person is lonely, and the person is unable. In the 12-step programs, that's referred to as powerlessness. I call it unable. The fourth thing to know about this sick, lonely, unable person at this point is that there's a lot of guilt that goes along with all of this. If I'm unable to perform whatever it is, do my schoolwork or go to my job and do a good job, or care for my family, engage in a positive way with other people. If I'm unable to do that sort of thing, I'm going to feel guilty. We all have high values and high morals, and we learn these things from our parents and our teachers and our ministers and folks like that. They tell us right and wrong, good and bad, we get all that sorted out. And so I have my values and my morals or ethics up here, but my behavior as a result of my illness is way down here. And guilt is what that leads to when there's that difference there. It's like, I believe in, I can tell you what a good worker is. Somebody who shows up every day for the job and puts in their best effort and they get results and all that sort of thing. And that's my goal here. That's who I want to be. Yet I'm not showing up for work, or when I go there, I'm in some kind of conflict with somebody, or I've got a hangover, or I'm just not wanting to do this, and I feel guilty. Same with my commitments to my family or my community. I'm either there for them or I'm not there for them. And if I'm not there for them, I'm feeling guilty because my value says a good parent is somebody who's there and, shows up for the kid and is supportive and loving and, all that. My behavior might be way different from what I'm believing I ought to be doing. So, to feel guilt is to believe, I'm doing bad things. The fifth thing to know is that this person feels a great amount of shame. As the guilt accumulates, the shame gets deeper and deeper into the core of the person. Now, some people come into addiction or mental illness or even PTSD with a core of shame because of some earlier trauma and childhood sexual abuse, for example, brings a great amount of shame with it. And so the first time that person picks up a drink and it makes all that stuff go away and they're, almost immediately addicted, then, you can know that they're going to experience a lot of shame. They're going to fuel the shame or add to the shame that's already in their core from their childhood abuse or witnessing domestic violence or being beaten, hit too hard, too often for no good reason, all of those things. So anyway, the shame, which is part of this whole affliction, this brain affliction we're talking about, mental illness, addiction, PTSD, the shame that comes about it is really deeply seated, and it kind of continues to grow in the person and can lead to self-destructive thoughts and harmful thoughts around suicide, that permanent solution for a temporary problem. And that's why we have a high suicide rate in this country. Untreated mental illness and poorly treated addictions or PTSD allow for this continuation of this developing shame, and the person would ultimately get to the point of self-destruction. And guilt is I'm doing bad things. Shame is I'm a bad person. Maybe I don't even deserve to live. That hopeless state, and the person pretty much is ready to give up. And that's when we offer them a treatment option. There is a very clear-cut path to recovery. I'm going to lay it out for you. It's based on what I call the big 5 values of recovery. So to learn about addiction or mental illness or PTSD, there's 5 things to know. The person's sick, lonely, unable, guilt-ridden, and shame-filled. For recovery, there's 5 things to do. Sobriety, the person has to get sober. Love, the person has to get in a system of care and start receiving support and love that they deserve and that they'll clearly benefit from. Unity, where a person joins up with like-afflicted people and shares their experience with those people and gets hope from those people. The 4th thing to do is around growth, doing self-improvement activities such as psychotherapy for family of origin issues. We've all got them. working the 12 steps if you're in a 12-step program, reading self-help books, practicing relaxation techniques, learning, anything, but growth enhancing activities. The fifth thing to do in order to fully recover from addiction, mental illness, or PTSD is spirituality. And spirituality isn't something that I'm going to try to define. I'm just going to tell you that spirituality has to do with practicing some sort of connective with the metaphysical or the divine or whatever, but some sort of a connection with maybe a higher power or the universe, or however you articulate it. It's a hard thing to talk about, but to really simplify it and to really get it and start doing it, it has to do with practicing activities such as meditation and prayer and connection with nature and reading spiritual material and uplifting, inspiring stuff, and providing yourself an opportunity each and every day to connect to something larger, something more all-encompassing, something uplifting, some bright light, some clarity, some godlike something, and doing that in a routine, ritualistic, reverent way each and every day is the completion or the totality of what we call recovery. It starts with sobriety, it comes with love next, then unity, the joining up phase, growth, all the self-improvement stuff we can do, and spirituality. Practicing those things each and every day to make that connection, to find, the source of energy. Where our focus goes, our energy flows. So if I'm focused on the big 5 values of recovery, and if I'm focused on staying sober today, connecting in a loving way, accepting love, doing self-love, loving others, being connected or joining up or having that unifying, that unity experience with like-afflicted people, doing the self-improvement stuff, doing the work that it takes, therapy, working those steps, whatever it happens to be. And then praying, meditating in the way that you know how. And practicing those things each and every day. Living life one day at a time with a present focus and understanding that people who are sick, lonely, unable, guilt-ridden, and shame-filled can experience recovery by getting sober for addiction, stable, sometimes with medications for mental illness, or safe for PTSD, and then follow it up with love, unity, growth, and spirituality. You got it. You're home free. Thank you.